They say silence is peaceful, that stepping away is a sign of maturity. But sometimes silence is not peace. It is escape. It is unfinished sentences, unanswered questions, and connections left quietly bleeding in the dark. Why do some people disappear without a word, leaving behind confusion instead of closure? Is it indifference or something far more fragile beneath the surface? In a world that glorifies independence, ghosting has become a silent epidemic. But what does it really reveal about the human mind? Let's begin. There is a particular kind of silence that feels louder than words. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of absence. A message left unread, a conversation that never ended, just stopped. And suddenly, someone who once felt present becomes a question mark in your mind. You wonder what changed. You replay your last words, searching for something you might have missed. Was it something you said? Something you didn't say? Or was their silence never about you at all? Ghosting is often seen as cold, even cruel, and sometimes it is. But beneath that disappearance, there is often something less visible, something quieter. Because not everyone who leaves does so out of indifference. Some leave because staying feels heavier than disappearing. To the one who ghosts, silence can feel like relief. No confrontation, no explanations, no emotional exposure, just distance. But to the one left behind, that same silence becomes a maze, a loop of unanswered questions, a story without an ending. And this is where the misunderstanding begins. Because what feels like escape for one feels like abandonment for another. So the question is not just why do people ghost, but rather, what kind of emotional weight makes disappearing feel easier than being understood? No one learns to disappear overnight. Silence, like any language, is practiced long before it is spoken. For some, it begins in places where emotions were never safely received, where speaking up led to dismissal, or worse, conflict, where feelings were not explored but avoided, minimized, or quietly ignored. In such spaces, expression does not feel like connection, it feels like risk. So the mind adapts. It learns that distance is safer than vulnerability, that withdrawing is easier than explaining, that silence protects what words might expose. And over time, this becomes a pattern so subtle, it no longer feels like a choice. You might notice it in small ways at first, the delayed replies, the hesitation before opening a message, the quiet urge to retreat when conversations begin to feel emotionally complex, not because there is no care, but because care itself starts to feel overwhelming. For some, attachment feels uncertain, like something that could disappear at any moment, so they leave first. For others, closeness brings a kind of pressure they cannot name, an expectation to respond, to show up, to be emotionally available in ways they were never taught how to be. And so instead of saying, "I don't know how to handle this," they say nothing at all. Because disappearing does not require explanation, it only requires distance. But beneath that distance, there is often a history of learning that staying present was never truly safe. The human mind is not designed to seek truth. It is designed to seek safety. And sometimes, safety does not look like honesty. It looks like avoidance. When a message arrives that carries emotional weight, something subtle begins to happen beneath the surface. A tightening in the chest, a hesitation in the mind, a quiet sense of pressure that is difficult to explain. It is not always fear of the other person. Sometimes it is fear of what the conversation might awaken inside. Because responding means engaging, and engaging means feeling. For someone who has learned to associate emotions with discomfort, this moment becomes a silent crossroads, approach or retreat. And more often than not, the mind chooses retreat. This is known as avoidance coping, a psychological response where the brain minimizes distress by stepping away from the source of it. But here is the paradox. The relief that comes from avoiding a message is immediate. The anxiety it creates is delayed. So silence feels like control in the moment, a way to pause the emotional demand, a way to protect oneself from saying the wrong thing or feeling too much. But the mind remembers what is unfinished. And over time, these unfinished interactions begin to accumulate, like unopened letters in a quiet room, each one holding a piece of connection that was never fully acknowledged. So ghosting is not always a lack of emotion. Sometimes it is the result of feeling too much and not knowing where to place it. There is a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when the person who disappeared thinks about returning. They see the message again. They feel the weight of what was left unsaid. And for a second, they consider replying. But something stops them. Not because they don't care, but because caring now feels complicated. What would they say? How do you explain absence without exposing everything behind it? How do you return to a conversation that has already grown heavy with silence? So the mind begins to negotiate. It's been too long. It would be awkward now. Maybe it's better to just leave it. And just like that, the distance becomes permanent. This is the invisible conflict, a quiet tension between intention and action, between the urge to reconnect and the instinct to protect oneself from discomfort. Because reaching out means facing something deeper, the possibility of guilt, of misunderstanding, of emotional exposure. And for someone who already struggles with these feelings, that risk feels overwhelming. So instead of resolving the tension, they escape it. But the conflict does not disappear. It lingers in small moments, in passing thoughts, in the subtle discomfort of knowing something was left unfinished. Because silence may protect you from a difficult conversation, but it does not protect you from the weight of it. At some point, the silence begins to echo. Not loudly, not all at once, but in small, almost forgettable moments. A familiar name appears somewhere. A memory resurfaces without warning. A conversation, unfinished, replays itself quietly in the background. And for a brief second, something shifts. The distance that once felt like relief starts to feel like absence. This is the moment of awareness, when disappearing no longer feels like freedom, but like something that has been quietly repeated, a pattern. You begin to notice it, not just once, but across different people, different connections. The same slow withdrawal, the same silence, the same unfinished endings. And the question changes. It is no longer, why did they matter so much? But rather, why does staying feel so difficult? Because what once seemed like isolated moments begins to reveal itself as something deeper. Not a flaw, not a failure, but a learned way of coping with emotional weight. And awareness does something subtle. It does not force change. It simply removes the illusion that nothing is happening. You start to see the cost of silence, not just in others, but within yourself. The missed connections, the words never said, the quiet distance that grows even when there was something real. And for the first time, you begin to wonder, what would happen if you stayed? Staying is not as simple as it sounds. It is not just about replying to a message or continuing a conversation. Staying means allowing yourself to be seen, even when you don't have the perfect words. For someone who has learned to disappear, this can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, because staying requires something silence never asked for: presence. It asks you to sit with the pause instead of escaping it, to face the uncertainty of how your words might be received, to admit, even quietly, I didn't know how to respond. And that kind of honesty can feel heavier than silence ever did. But there is something else hidden within it, a different kind of relief. Not the quick relief of avoidance, but the slower, steadier relief of no longer running. Because connection was never meant to be perfect, it was meant to be real. And real connections hold space for hesitation, for imperfection, for delayed words that still choose to arrive. Staying does not erase the past, it does not undo the silence, but it changes what comes next. It turns disappearance into presence, distance into something that can be bridged, and slowly, almost gently, it reshapes the way you relate to others and to yourself. Because sometimes the most difficult thing is not letting go, but allowing yourself to remain. If this video made you feel seen, if parts of this silence felt familiar in ways you couldn't quite explain, then maybe there is nothing wrong with you. Maybe there is only something that learned to protect itself, quietly, carefully, over time. And you are not alone in that. There are many who carry unfinished conversations within them, many who have disappeared, and many who are still waiting to understand why. If you'd like to stay connected to a space like this, a place where the hidden corners of the human mind are explored with care and honesty, you're always welcome here. And if you feel comfortable, you can share your thoughts below, not because you have to, but because your words might help someone else feel a little less alone in their silence. Take care of yourself. You deserve gentleness.